exactly whether rule number 4 applies only to bananas or it applies to all the other fruits that have been mentioned. But probably, intuitively, you will understand that it just refers to bananas. So you buy apples, oranges, bananas, but don't buy bananas if they are too ripe. That would be the full meaning of rule number 4. And then rule number 5, sweets if you wish. So here we're going back to mentioning an object, something that you can buy. And you see also that in this case, it is optional. So we add some expression that tells us that this is, you can buy it also, but only if you wish. So this is more or less how the Anubhuti works. In the rule number 2, you say oranges, but if you would have to say what this rule actually means, you have to say if you go to the market, buy oranges. That would be the full Vutti. And that is because the expression, if you go to the market, buy, all this information recurs. That means it applies again. So this is how the Anubhuti or Anuvrutti recurrence works in ordinary language. That is the economy of language. If we would have to put this mechanism into a sort of rule of thumb or the basic 3 rules, that they are all combined, it would be something like this. Items performing the same function cancel one another. This is the first principle. So when you have a series of rules, if there are items that they are performing the same function in the sentence, they cancel one another. And most important rule, number 2, whatever is not cancelled recurs. So if something is not denied, it still recurs. It has to be read again. Anuvattate, it applies again. And third, the particle cha, which means and similar particles indicate, sorry for the typo, indicate recurrence. So the particle cha means and. Sometimes the recurrence happens automatically. Sometimes authors will use particle cha simply to prevent any misunderstanding. Now we are trying to exemplify how Anubhuti works with a meaningless type of structure. So here it doesn't matter really what X, Y, Z mean. Just we have to understand that these are 3 different words or blocks and they have different colors. Each color represents a function. So this is more or less how sutras are built. If you remember previous sessions, there are different functions that can be expressed using different case endings. So I refer to the lesson or the session number 2. We have the second session where we explain that. Now, this would be one, suppose this is one sutta, one rule. And in the next rule, you find simply this. So you find the block in color yellow, which instead of Y says O. Now the question will arise, what do we read in the first column and in the third column? So I give you some seconds to guess, but I don't think it's very difficult to understand that whatever is not denied recurs. Whereas for the central block, because it performs the same function, we have another item performing the function yellow, so Y is already cancelled. Now suppose we have a third rule, a third sutta, which is pink or purple, as you wish. And here we only have this bit of information, and there should be other information recurring. So you will have to guess what recurs here. So in the first column, in the green or turquoise function, there has been no cancellation. So probably we should expect X. We have to read X again. And in the yellow column, after O has replaced Y, O has not been cancelled. So what we will have to read finally is X, O, P. This would be the full meaning of P, this third rule. So although we will only say P, we have to understand X, O, P. And this is how Anubhuti works. So you don't need to repeat information that still applies, but if you want to change this information, you cancel it with an item performing the same function. So now we are going to look at real suttas, real rules. On the left-hand side, you see a kind of chart with the technical terms that are used to refer to the case endings. Especially there are some that are not immediately obvious, like the nominative singular is called si. So this is not an ending that you will find usually, but that's how at the beginning of the derivation of a word, that's what you will see. So we start with a random rule that we choose, sagamo se. And here, sagamo, in the rule, you have to understand the sandhi sa agama, the augment sa, s. And the word se is a locative singular of sa. So here sa, if you can see on the left, it refers to dative singular and genitive singular. So the vibhakti or case ending for dative singular and genitive singular is called sa. So immediately this is the first case ending that you will apply if you want to produce a dative or genitive singular. But the rule doesn't say sa, it says se. So se is just the locative of sa. And that means before sa. That means before the dative or genitive singular ending. So there is the augment s or sa before the dative genitive singular. So the result will be something like this. If you want to make the dative or genitive of purisa, you will have the nominal base purisa plus sa. But because of this rule, Kaccāyana 61, you have to insert or add an augment before the case ending. So you will have purisassa. Here you can see three different translations of the rule, and that is what you will find in extenso in the handout. In the handout I have given the full translation with the full translation of the Vutti, of Ashin Titsena's translation, Venerable Tiapmalai's translation in his PhD, and Bhikkhu Nandisena's translation. I wanted to show these translations for various reasons, and one is simply to show how difficult and challenging actually is translating the Kaccāyana. And you can see that these three translations, they are translating exactly the same bit of text, which is what you find on the top, Sagamo se, plus the Vutti or gloss, Sakaragamo hoti sevipattinhi. And Venerable Titsana says an S is to be inserted and added to the front of sa when a chatutti or chatti vibhakti singular sa is applied after a noun. And then he gives the clue. Whereas Tiapmalai says the sound sa is inserted when the case ending sa follows. When the case ending sa follows, the sound sa is augmented. Okay? And then Bhikkhu Nandisena translates when sa follows, there is insertion of s. But this is the most synthetic translation, which, as you can see, is even shorter than the text that it is translating. Then you can wonder why. And here what Bhikkhu Nandisena is doing is actually simply translating the Vutti, because theoretically, the Sutta Sagamo se and the Vutti Sakaragamo hoti sevipattinhi, they should mean the same. So one question when we translate such sutra treatises is whether it makes any sense to actually translate the sutra into English, because even in Pali the text doesn't make much sense. You need to disclose the hidden meaning that is recurring. So in this case, I think just translating the Vutti, the gloss, Sakaragamo hoti sevipattinhi, that gives you the full meaning of Sagamo se. And that's precisely what Bhikkhu Nandisena is doing. His translation is quite elegant, and I think it's more or less easy to understand if you are following the text. When sa follows, there is insertion of s. Of course, if you see Ashin Titsena's translation, he is telling us what this sa actually means. It's not any sa. It means the sa that represents the chatutti, that means the dative, or chatti, that means the genitive, vibhakti, case ending, and in the singular. So we know it from the chart on the left, on the left of the screen. So you can see different types of translation, and I would say, in my own opinion, that if you just read the translation, it is very difficult to follow the actual meaning of the text, but of course we have to try. This was just to exemplify the challenges of translating. But today we are discussing Anuvutti, and Anuvutti cannot work with only one sutta. We need more. We need to see how the information is flowing from one sutta to another. So this was the first, and then let's see the next one. Kaccāyana 61, Sagamo se. Kaccāyana 62, Samsasu ekavachanesu cha. You can already see the cha, which is usually a flag It's telling us that maybe there is anuvutti here. Indeed, there is anuvutti here. And these are again translations of this samsasu ekavachanesu cha with the gloss or vutti samsasu ekavachanesu vivatya desesu sakara gamo hoti. You can already see that sakara gamo hoti is recurring from the previous rule. There is nothing in samsasu ekavachanesu cha that tells you that the concept sakara gamo is there. It is not explicit, but because of the cha, we have to read it again. So see how the translators render this rule with the comment. And S is to be similarly inserted to the front of sam and sa when sattami, chatutti, chatti singular vibhattis have been transformed into sam or sa. And then the clue. Another possible translation. Also the sound sa is inserted when sam or sa follows or follow as a singular case ending. That will be a translation only of the sutta, and the translation of the vutti, the letter sa is augmented when the singular case ending sam or sa follows. So you can see that they are translating exactly the same text, but you can see the differences in the English. And then yet another one, Bhikkhun and Dissena, always a little bit more concise. There is the insertion of s, the sound s, when there is the substitution of inflections sam and sa. Actually, here you have to read long sa. But these are three different ways of saying it. What is most relevant here for our purposes is not the full meaning of the rule, or what is the exact meaning here of vibhattya desesu, which is a replacement vibhakti. So there are different types of vibhaktis. This type of vibhaktis, sam and sa, are specifically called vibhaktya desa. That means replacement vibhaktis. We're not going into that. This is not important for our purposes. The most important thing here to see is that all translations, they take for granted that in samsasu ekavachanesu cha, you are still reading sakara agamo from the previous rule. So here, what has happened is that from the previous rule, one thing has changed. The locative function has changed. In Kaccāyana 61, you have the word se performing the function of the, if you remember the lesson 2 or the second session, this will be more or less how the structure of an operation works. In this case, it is a replacement, but in any other operations, the context works in the same way. For the left context, that means expressing after X item, we use the ablative, but when we use the locative, that means right context, and we have to translate it before Y or before that item. So here, se means before sa, and samsasu ekavachanesu means before sam and sa when they are singular. So you can see that one locative has cancelled the other one. So samsasu ekavachanesu has cancelled se. So in rule 62, you no longer read se. But the sagamo from rule 61 has not been cancelled. So you have to read it again. And that's what you find. Sakara gamo hoti, you read it again. This is from 61. It has not been cancelled, it recurs. That's the rule. So this is what you see. So sagamo in 61 recurs again in 62. In many scholarly books on grammar, you will see that they write it again in square brackets or round brackets and with the number of the original rule from which it is coming. And then the rest, samsasu ekavachanesu cha is the rule proper. Samsasu ekavachanesu has replaced se. And the cha is a modulator, in this case a marker, that is telling us that there is some anuvritti, there is some dragging. So we are dragging the word sagamo from the previous rule. Here, just explaining what's going on. One has been cancelled, the other one has not been cancelled. The technical terms to express when something is recurring, as we said before, like anuvutti, so the verb would be anuvattate. When something anuvattate, you will see that, for instance, in some commentaries in the Rupa Siddhi, the grammar of Buddha Piya, based on the Kaccāyana. Sometimes you find the expression anuvattate. That means it recurs, it comes again, it applies again. Whereas the expression nivattate, or the concept of nivutti or nivattana, means stopping to recur, ceasing to recur. It's the opposite. So if we now try to see these two rules using these blocks, we can see that the rule 61 that we call the first one in our sequence is sagamose. And then how we would see the next one would be samsaswe kavachane sucha. So what do we have to read here? Sagamo. This is what we have seen. This is a clear, simple anubhuti. But now we are going to complicate it a little bit more. So far, I think it's quite easy to understand, quite straightforward. There are not so many technicalities, I would say. Maybe I'm wrong in that. If so, then in the question and answer we can discuss and we can try to clarify. But I think so far it's quite simple. Sometimes, though, there are complexities that we need to learn when we study grammar, but as long as we have understood the main concept, that is fine. So then the next rule after sagamose, samsaswe kavachane sucha, and then we find the rule that is etimasam I. So etimasam here is a genitive plural. So here you can see the case endings. Sometimes it's not easy to understand which case ending. For instance, in the third rule of the line, what about I? How do you know this is a nominative? Well, you know it because you study grammar, then you understand. It's just the sound I, the speech sound, the akkara I, short I. And etimasam is a genitive plural. So before you've seen that the structure of the rules were nominative plus locative, and then by anubhuti nominative, locative plus a marker that doesn't count in the information. But now the structure has changed. We have genitive plus nominative. And if you remember from class 2, you might remember, this is already telling us that probably this type of rule is a replacement. Whereas before, the type of rules that we have seen, they are agamas or insertions or augments. There are, as we said in the beginning, there are different types of operations or rules. Some of them, they prescribe the insertion of a sound. Some of them, they prescribe the deletion or elision of a sound, lopa. And many of them, what they prescribe is a replacement. The replacement rules are very common, and they are usually expressed, the standard way of expressing it, that you will always find, is a genitive and a nominative. If you remember, the genitive means that thing which is to be replaced, and the nominative expresses what is the replacement. So in this case, if we just read straightforward, means I replaces etimasam. Actually, etimasam you have to understand if you look at the handout and the translations. I think we have them here. So let's see the translation first. Etimasam I, the Buddhi says, eta ima ichete sam antosaro, ikaro hoti samsaswe kavachane subhivatta deseso. That means the last vowel a of eta and ima changes into I. So I replaces not the entire pronoun eta or ima, but just the last sound. We know this from a paribhasa rule that is not stated in the Kaccāyana. Well, we already know this if we study the meta rules. I'm just telling this now. We are not concerned with this here. So this I changes the last sound of eta and ima when sam and sa functions have been carried out. And a note, another translation. The final vowel of eta and ima is changed into I when sam and sa are singular case endings. See here that Venerable Thermalai is already indicating the anubhuti in round brackets. So this part of the translation, when sam and sa are singular case endings, this comes from the previous rule, samsaswe kavachanesu, if you remember. So this is the way he is using to express the anubhuti, the recurring information. And then he translates the buddhi proper. The final vowel of eta and ima is changed into I when the singular case ending substitute sam and sa follow. As you can see very well, there is no difference between the full translation of the sutta and the translation of the buddhi, because any full translation of the sutta will look like the buddhi. The buddhi is nothing but the full expression of the meaning of the sutta. Finally, Nandisena's version, again, simply giving one translation that it applies to the sutta or the buddhi. The end of eta and ima, or the ending vowels of eta and ima, are changed to I when there is substitution of the inflections sam and sa. Okay, it's quite complicated. But here we were discussing about anubhuti only. And so we see that there is a genitive and a nominative. Now this is the situation. The question will be then, what do we read here? As you have seen already, what we have to read again is samsaswe kavachanesu. Why? Because there is no new block performing the function, the yellow function, in this case is the locative. There is one performing the nominative function, so the E, so that replaces sagamo. And then we have etimasam, which is a new function, the function of the standing or that thing which is going to be replaced. So this is what we are going to read in this rule. And that, as you have seen, what the translators read and what the Buddhi reads. So that's the correct way of reading the rule number 3 here. Etimasam E actually has to mean etimasam E samsaswe kavachanesu. This is the full reading. The question, of course, is why you are not reading cha again. There is nothing that has cancelled cha yet. Well, cha is not exactly, doesn't fit into these functions, the proper of the operation. As you remember, I call this cha a modulator. This is simply modulating the workings of the rule. And in this case, it's the cha itself that indicates the anubhuti in the second rule of the line. Moreover, this cha is cancelled actually by the structure of the rule, the third rule, which is showing us that we are moving into a replacement rule, into a adesa rule. So we are coming from agama, and now we are moving to an adesa rule, a replacement. That's why the cha is actually cancelled and no longer applies. But this is a little bit too technical. I think this is just, I guess you will have to trust my word on this. But the point is that you don't really need to read the cha again here, although sometimes it does recur. Like if the third rule, instead of being a different type of operation, would still be an agama operation, then you could probably also read the cha. So these are the 3 rules. This is the translation. And here you can see there is this overlap. There is information from rule 61 going into rule 62. So this is flowing because it's not stopped. So the flow of information continues. And then this bit of information from rule 62, which is flowing because it is not stopped, it is not cancelled, is flowing to rule 63. I think that is pretty clear. Then this rule is an agama. You know it's an agama because the rule itself is telling you. Here there is also agama. The cha is telling you that there's also sa agama. There is also an agama of s. But this one is adesa. You know that because you see the genitive plus the nominative, and that looks pretty much like a replacement rule. So you know that we have moved from agama to adesa. So no need to tell. Now to conclude this class, I would like to share a very brief reflection on anubhuti and how the sutra as a system of knowledge works. So you know that the word sutra, which in Pali is, at least for the grammar, in Pali it's rendered as sutta, means thread. It's a thread. So maybe some of you wondered why the sutras or the rules are called threads. Do they look like a thread, or what is the metaphor here? Actually, there is actually a textile metaphor. So you have to understand that these rules are like threads, and like in a fabric, these threads intersect one with the other, but not all threads intersect with all threads, and there are no threads that do not intersect with other threads. So any thread of the fabric should intersect with others. It has to be interconnected with some others in order to create the necessary tension and cohesion. But of course, they cannot all be in contact. Otherwise, it would be, I guess, a ball of wool or cotton or whatever. It wouldn't be a proper fabric. So if you understand it in this way, in this metaphorical way, and by the way, when the fabric itself or the textile in Sanskrit or Pali would be called a tantra. So a tantra would be what you weave after you put all the threads together. So if we think in this way, you can conceive the 3 sutras that we have seen, or sutras, the 3 threads in the following manner. We started with sagamo se, and then we are putting another thread below, samsasvika vachane sucha. And there is an intersection here. But then after samsasvika vachane sucha, we put another thread, vertical one, etimasam, which intersects with samsasvika vachane sucha. It does not intersect with sagamose. So you see that here there are intersections or nodes, because anubhuti or recurrence is used to create information nodes. Nodes, that means these intersections. These are points that are common to two threads and therefore may be stated once instead of twice, thus avoiding any form of redundancy. That means we are avoiding repeating the same words because there's already an intersection, and that saves time or energy, as you wish. It saves words. We can say more with less. And that's the whole point of anubhuti, that is recurrence. So to summarize, recurrence, anubhuti, can be understood in this way. This is the principle. Items performing the same function cancel one another, and whatever is not cancelled recurs. And then most of the times the particle cha and similar particles will indicate that there is some recurrence going on. Thank you very much. Stop here for today. Okay. If there are any questions? You can write them on the chat if you wish. Okay, Kaccāyana 530. Maybe we can look at Kaccāyana 530. 1 second. Am I right in saying that this rule is Kwicha? Because in Pin's edition, (532) in Pin, they say yes. So I will tackle this first, and then Professor Kate has asked a question when Cha is using and when not. Yeah, I'm going to share the screen again. So this is the rule that we are mentioning here. Kwicha sabbehi dhatuhi kwi pachayo hoti. So after all dhatus, the kwi pachaya applies. It applies there, and there is the cha. So here, of course, we see this cha, and this cha seems to be dragging the sabba dhatuhi. So sabbehu dhatuhi appears here. It appears before. Here, only certain dhatus. So I don't remember the passage, of course, by heart. Sabbato dhatuto. Sabbato appears from here. So why he says sabbehi here, that I understand could be the question, because here it's already here. It's already all. Yeah, one has to look into the actual details. Okay, I'm sure that someone who knows the Kaccāyana by heart could probably trace this sabbehi to its origin. But yeah, what it seems here is that you can see also it recurring here, sabadatuhi and sabehidatuhi recurring, and that's because of the cha. And then there is the kuipachaya because of, after any dhatu, any verbal root, literally. But so what would the question be about this one? So the runway, I understand. After all roots, yeah. Yeah, this one also to connect it with Professor Kate's question. When do we use cha? So the question is to say a bit more about when cha is used and when not. The thing is that, as we say in the rule of thumb, not only cha is used for anubhuti, also sometimes the word pi, which means also. So cha means as well or also. Pi, api means also. So these words are many times used to imply anubhuti. But many scholars, including Pali scholars of the past, and when I say of the past means since the 12th century or even before maybe, they have been a little bit critical with the ways in which Kaccāyana uses these technical terms, because it is not quite clear why and how he is using them. To the point that European scholars, at least those from the 19th, early 20th century, they simply think that there is no system. There is no system at all. And sometimes this cha means one thing, sometimes it means some other thing. And there is no way to know what it really means unless you read what the Vutti or the commentary is saying. So that's one, I would say that's an extreme way of looking at it. In part, I think it's true. It is true that the Kaccāyana is not 100% systematic. You cannot create a rule. Like what I have said today is more an orientation or understanding how ideally Anubhuti works. Probably in Paninian grammar, in Sanskrit grammar, it works better, or it works more systematically. Definitely not in the Kaccāyana grammar. So what I have said today is not something that you will have to apply mechanically and systematically at any point where cha appears. Always, so the real rule of thumb, which is not a rule at all, is always you have to look for the context. You have to understand the context. Every rule will be a thread that is intersecting with other threads. So you need to know this cha, what is it referring to? The point is, once you understand what it is referring to, then you just memorize the sutta, and then you will remember that, okay, this cha is actually bringing again or dragging again that bit of information. But apart from that, I don't think there is a real clear system of using cha in the Kaccāyana. That's what most scholars say. I would agree with that. Although I should also say that there has not been extensive research on this point. For instance, recently I've been trying to do research on some other type of markers. That's something we are going to see in the next class, in the next session. That is the option markers. So when you are marking, saying this is, you can derive this word or that one. So there are options. In Panini, in the Paninian grammar, there has been a debate about the actual meaning and the actual function of option markers in the Paninian grammar. So even in Panini, there is not a consensus among scholars, even among leading scholars, as to the exact meaning of words like wa, vivasha, vikalpa, etc. So what do we mean when we say or? Like similarly, we would say, what do we mean when we say cha, and? So this is not clear at all. But if we look, for instance, at the meaning of wa, as we will see next day, there are some discussions in the commentaries, in the Kaccāyana commentaries, and they are aware of the problems, and they try to systematize these words, especially in the Rupa Siddhi and later commentaries. And there seems to be some system, but again, you will always have to look for the context, because the maximum point where they can arrive in systematizing is saying generally it works like this. In most cases, it works like this. So in most cases, the word cha means that, but not always. So there is no rule that will apply always everywhere in the grammar, because it's, I don't know. Actually, the reason why it's like this, I don't really know. I hope that more or less can answer the question. Basically, it means that I don't know the answer. don't know if there's any more questions. I don't know if Okay, the handout. The handout is in the Google Drive folder, and I have shared it at the beginning of the class. So you will probably find the link if you scroll up back to the beginning of this conversation. I hope it's there. I think it should still be there. There are two Google Drive links, and one is one are the slides, and the other one is the handout. I think it's quite interesting to look at the translations because, and I would include myself, of course, in the list of people who are trying to teach Pali grammar, traditional grammar, and have the feeling that they are failing. Because you understand it, and I'm sure many of you already understood many things, but then when you have to try to express it or translate it, that there are many problems because there are so many things that are, I guess, they are taken for granted, and you have to explain those first, and then I guess one finds himself or herself in the same position as the grammarians. That you have to decide which information you give first and which information you give later, and how you do that, and not to give too much information. Well, that's the problem of all teachers, I guess. I'm trying to get so this one link. This is the handout. You will see it in the chat again for those who came a little bit later, and then I'm going to share the slides also. So when we read the translations, you have the handout contains only bits, the bit that we have read today, but you have the entire translations in the Google Drive, and you can go through them, you can use them. It's always, I find it useful to have as many translations as possible. If you can read other languages like French, maybe you can check Emile Senar's translation. There are some scholars of traditional grammar that they do not recommend translating, and that's also something I've been wondering. Like, is there any point in translating a sutra, or better to give some comments and explain what's the meaning and how it works? So here we have another question. When commentaries quote Kaccāyana, do they usually quote just the sutta or also the Buddhi? What is everyone's experience? Apologies for not participating in conversation. I am in UK on a train. Well, that's actually great because it means we can attend. Last day I was actually walking with my son and I attended Naomi Appleton's lecture. So thanks to the phones now we can attend many lectures. But I couldn't. You are very lucky, Professor Kate, because you can write in the chat. I couldn't ask questions in the chat, so maybe I have to change my phone. Well, the question is for everyone, I guess. What's your experience with Kaccāyana quotations in the commentaries? That is to say, I guess I understand it's commentaries that are not grammatical works. So outside the grammar, you will find Kaccāyana sometimes quoted, Kaccāyana or Moggallana or the Sattaniti. In my experience, you see both the Kaccāyana and sometimes the Buddhi, and sometimes it is not clear. That is something that hopefully in the last, so we have 2 more sessions remaining. The next one, we are going to discuss a little bit more about Anuvrutti, optionality, and we're going to complicate things a little bit more, but reading real suttas and reading the Kaccāyana. And in the last session, I'm planning to show you examples of texts, Pali texts, that they are not about grammar. They are maybe about the Vinaya, but they quote the Kaccāyana in order to explain the meaning of a word. So that is the... And yeah, I guess even when the commentators or authors of other disciplines mention the Kaccāyana, we should not forget that they even if they only quote the Kaccāyana Sutta, sometimes the way they use this sutta implies their knowledge of the commentaries. So the way they are using the sutta and what they get with that sutta, the result that they achieve, implies maybe that they have read the Mukhamatadipani, that means the Nyasa commentary on the Kaccāyana, or some other commentary. But that is not something that they will tell explicitly. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I would like to ask, since there are no questions, do you feel like reading more text next day, or the theory parts where I give, what is the structure, how it works, is better, or a mixture like today is okay? I'm wondering if we just should jump into the text and do as much as we can, which is not much in 1 hour or half an hour, or you like this mixture of theory and reading. And while you are pondering that, then there is another question from Devan Jones. My understanding is that the sutra structure of Ashtadhyayi is to do with its oral tradition. Is the sutra structure of Kaccāyana also connected with an oral teaching method? Yeah, I think that's something we discussed a little bit in passing in the first day. Here, the problem or the issue, I think, would be to define what we mean by oral. If by oral we mean a method that does not use writing at all, then I don't think that even Panini or Kaccāyana are purely oral. At least if you take them as a traditions, we are today in 2020 and 21. We look at the tradition, it's not an oral tradition. There is a lot of writing. Actually, there is more writing than orality, or it's always mixed. So I think this applies to Panini, and it also applies to the Kaccāyana. If you look at the map, you will see that Panini is a grammar that, in theory, and I would subscribe to this opinion, was an innovation. So although it looks more oral, more like coming from an oral culture that would be more ancient, and grammars like the Kaccāyana, they use less technical or short words. It's probably the Panini is an innovation, and it was composed in an area that, although we call it India, was for many centuries a province of the Persian Empire. That means a province of the Persian Empire where writing was known since very ancient times, unlike other parts of what we call India. So it is possible. It's a possibility that actually the innovations that we find in Panini were only possible because they were already using writing. But even if they were using writing systems, that doesn't mean that they were reading and writing, and of course they could not go after that to the printer or to the photocopy or scan the book and just read silently like we do. Of course, it was a traditional method, and the goal is always to memorize. Even writing supports, I guess, they were too fragile, or for some reason they always prefer to memorize. So I think the real issue here is not whether something is written or it is spoken, but whether something is memorized or not. You have to memorize. If you memorize it, then you know it. And of course, when you memorize something, that something is not oral or is not written, it's just in your memory, whatever that is, it's in your mind. It's intangible, and that's the goal. That's when you know something. If you don't know it by heart, you don't know it. And so going back to the structure of Panini and Kaccāyana, in the end, I don't think they are that different, dissimilar. But for different reasons, the Kaccāyana is simplified in many ways. And when you simplify things in one way, you are also losing information on the other side. And I think that's what happened. So many people will be critical with the Kaccāyana grammar because it's not systematic enough. But that's why it's easier than Panini, So you get something and you lose another thing. So something is lost in simplification. Instead of lost in translation, it's lost in simplification. But you achieve simplification, which is most important here. Yeah. So yeah, the memorization is the key. So maybe today we can think of differences between memory and knowledge, but I'm not so sure that in the past or in many cultures you could establish a clear difference. Even like if we go into the meaning of memory, you also know that attention and memory are the same word in Pali or in Sanskrit, sati or smriti, or mindfulness, so-called mindfulness. There's actually also memory. So what is memory? What is, well, these are different. This is not what we are talking about, but it is connected, of course. If someone would be interested in following this line of thought or this line of research, there is a lot to say about that. The good thing about Pali grammar, when we study the tradition, is that is a scholastic method. So it tells us how ancient monks studied, whereas you cannot see that in a totally clear manner if you just read the suttas. Probably if you read commentaries, you can more or less see it. But clearly, when you see the Kaccāyana grammar, that is a grammar that they used to study. That was not the final goal. That was a medium. So that tells you how they were trying to reach their goal, which was reading the Pali text. And they were doing that by studying this treatise that we have been reading today. Okay, there is a question by some person called Anuja, and that's a very difficult question, and I cannot answer it today, but I will take note, and next day, like what we did with the Upagupta, I will prepare a little bit, and hopefully by looking at this example that has been mentioned before by Adam, the qui or quip in Panini, this suffix and how it works, we can also exemplify differences between the Paninian or Sanskrit method of treating words, word derivation, and the Pali Kaccāyana method. But right now, I'm definitely not in a position to answer this difficult question. But thank you very much. I think everyone is fine with the mixture method, so I will stick to it. Yeah. No more questions. So I think it's time. I thank you all for joining today. And yeah, we have two more sessions to complete this course. See you next week. Take care. Stay safe. And yeah. I think today we don't have anyone moderating, so I'm on my own. If you want to say bye-bye in the chat or bye-bye on the messages, you can do it. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Aleix.
Thank you very much. Hi, P.
Hiya.
I think that's it, no?
Sorry about being late. I was.
No worries. I know. I explained everyone that we had a meeting, so no worries. I started recording from the beginning, so I think I have the complete video.
All right. Okay. Good. Great.
Let's see how it looks like.